everybody. This is Brian David Marshall coming to you from the Pro Tour set at Magic Weekend Nagoya. I'm here with Kenny Öberg, everyone's favorite rogue deck designer. You probably know him as the Tezzerator from his Pro Tour Berlin top 8. The format this weekend is Scars Block constructed, and we're doing our first deck tech of the weekend with you because you've got the deck we've been calling, I don't know what the name is, we've been just calling it the Podcaster. Birthing Pod is a card a lot of people were excited about. Not a lot of people were able to figure out how to make it work. Tell us a little bit about this deck.
This deck is basically a combination of two decks. Like on one side you have Grand Architect and Treasure Mages, and on the other side you have Birthing Pod. And then you just put them together in one deck and just abuse the synergy they have between themselves.
So describe to you tell me a little bit, you said that there's a dream opening you can get in this deck that is almost unbeatable. So you start with
Vedalken Certarch.
So you have two copies of that, yeah.
And then you play a Spellskite or a Silver Myr, doesn't really matter.
Either of these on turn 2.
And then you follow up with a Grand Architect. And then you play Birthing Pod. And you could just like find Spellskite if it was a Silver Myr, or you could just have go for Treasure Mage or anything. And you have basically access to anything in your deck and answers to anything the opponent can play.
So with the Spellskite in play, your opponent can't successfully kill your Grand Architect because you can make your Spellskite the target, but they also can't kill your Birthing Pod.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes it so amazing, because it's an artifact and a creature.
That's a really sweet synergy that I don't know if a lot of people saw when they were talking about this kind of deck. So let's talk a little bit about going up the chain. So we've got our 1s, we've got our 2s, we've got our 3s. So at 4, you've got one of my favorite cards in the set, the Phyrexian Metamorph.
It's so flexible card.
I saw you do some pretty filthy stuff with this. We'll get to that as we go a little further up the chain. And then here's another card that's been, I think, a breakout card this weekend, Entomber Exarch.
Yeah, the discard and the creature grave digging effect is very flexible, and it's very unexpected when you Birthing Pod it up.
Right. So you know, people are sitting back on a card, they have something in mind, and you get this, and you can get back the card you just sacrificed, or you can
discard
discard a card.
Mass removal or something.
So next stop up the chain is we have some 5s.
Kuldotha Forgemaster. So it's well known what it can do, and it's a creature and it's a tinker. What more can you ask for?
Right. So we have another 3 which we backed up here, but you'll understand maybe why we're keeping them with the 6s.
Yes, 6 or more.
Treasure Mage.
Treasure Mage is basically the demonic tutor of this deck, and it provides mana with a Grand Architect, so it goes really fast to accelerate and find what you need.
So if you naturally draw Treasure Mage and Grand Architect, you can make a turn for Wurmcoil Engine.
Yeah, anything basically. Yeah.
So we have a handful of targets, really, and this is a pretty basic deck, right? So at the top of the curve, we have this package of cards. We have a Wurmcoil Engine you can get, which is really nice to sacrifice.
Yeah, you can sacrifice
Pod.
it, get some tokens, and get to this 7-mana card that's next. Myr Battlesphere.
Did you consider Elesh Norn at all when you were looking at your 7s?
Yes, I did, but it's a little bit too bad to draw the cards that you cannot play out with your regular mana base. So the only card that actually made a cut was the Exarch, the black one. Okay. But I consider it.
And then you have a couple more 6s here that you can get with your Treasure Mage.
Yes.
So
it's Mindslaver and Wrath of God, the opponent.
Contagion Engine. So this you said this replaced the need for Elesh Norn.
Yes, it is. Basically, you set up a Contagion Engine and kill every small creature they have, and then you start to overpower them with Myr Battlesphere or Phyrexian Metamorph into Myr Battlesphere, and they attack for amazing amount of damage. So
the final non-land card in the deck is the Spine of Ish Sah. Now this becomes pretty exciting with the Phyrexian Metamorph. I saw a situation where you played this, and next turn you were going to be able to play this.
Yes, and I will copy the Spine and Vindicate another permanent, and then you could start recurring it with this land.
Phyrexia's Core.
And you could sacrifice the Metamorph and you will get the Metamorph back, you could copy something else, or you could just Spine them 2 times a turn
it's a Spine that you get to play for 3 or 4 mana each turn.
Exactly. It's no coming back from that.
So being able to recur Spine of Ish Sah with a Phyrexia's Core is also possible, but it's really you've got to invest 9 total mana to do that.
But it's like enough with a Grand Architect or a Treasure Mage. You get a 9 mana if you want.
Yeah. So you have a big, it's really like kind of like a mono blue deck. We have a ton of islands and some Inkmoth Nexus. But you felt it was necessary to play forests for the Birthing Pod?
You need a couple. From the beginning there were more forests in the deck, but as you streamline it, it turns into a Grand Architect deck with Birthing Pod synergies. So it's just a few forests. You really want 2 islands turn 3.
So here's a card that I don't think was on a lot of people's radar in your sideboard. I think it's pretty exciting. Tell us about the Neurok Commando.
It's for the control decks and the removal decks. So you basically sideboard a package with Commando and 4 Stoic Rebuttal. And backing that up with Treasure Mages and Grand Architects, you become a fish deck if you need to. And they sit there with all the artifact removal, all the creature removal, and they do nothing, and you just grind them out.
And then Marrow Shards. I assume this is for the Tempered Steel decks and the Vault Scourges. And
yeah, exactly. And it's really a blowout because you're not white in your main deck. So they don't really expect the Marrow Shards. And several people have walked right into it today already.
And then just rounding out your sideboard.
Yeah, some different removal. Basically, I wanted 3 removals for the Tempered Steel matchup. But the Gremlin Mine was very good for us, but we didn't want all 3, so we spread out our removals to cover some other matchups as well if you need to.
Dismember, Disperse, and a Gremlin Mine. Yeah. So you said you've been playtesting the block constructed format for a long time. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the sort of evolution of this deck.
The evolution of this deck was basically first a Birthing Pod deck, green-black. Everyone has tried it with Glissa and stuff. And you merge it and you skip the green cards and start playing with Architect and Treasure Mages. Because if you have Grand Architect, it's basically such a good mana accelerator. And you can find more Treasure Mages with Birthing Pod, and you could step up the curve much faster than opponents. But from the beginning it was like Viridian Corruptors. You wanted to find that with Birthing Pod, and then you start cycling Metamorph into Viridian Corruptors. But that wasn't good enough because the mana base became too bad with more forests. Right. So every step of the way, all the green cards have been cut and less forest, and eventually it's just Birthing Pod and the artifact core. Right.
So we're about halfway through the Swiss rounds on day 1. Yeah. You're 2-1. Yeah. I gotta tell you, when you were playtesting this format, did you see Whispering Spectre?
No, I didn't expect it. And of course I got a blowout with a Whispering Spectre and Pump, and he mind sludged me.
Yeah, we saw you, like, it was like turn 4, turn 5. Yeah. Your opponent just like made you dump your entire hand off a Whispering Spectre. Yeah. That's your one loss so far. But really, this deck is set up to beat the red decks and the white decks, which you expect to be the majority of the field.
And the control decks, I think.
Okay. So when you say a control deck, you're talking about like the Consecrated Sphinx decks and the blue-white decks and the Bant decks?
Yeah, I think those are the pillars of the format, the red decks, the steel decks, and Sphinx in any version.
And did you play against any of those decks in your first couple of rounds?
I met the Temple Steel deck the first round and won. Much thanks to the Marrow Shards. And in the second round I met a blue-green-white deck. Michael Jacob playing Sphinx and lots of creatures.
So do you see, as we move towards Innistrad and we rotate out that Zendikar block from Standard, do you see that this deck will have any kind of application to Standard moving forward as we go into a new format?
I hope so. It depends on how much artifact removal and counters there's access to, but when Jace rotates, this is one of the most powerful things you can do.
Right, Birthing Pod is just very, very powerful.
It's basically actually the Grand Architect that's one of the most important cards.
Really? So you have, like, if you were going to do sort of a fantasy draft of this deck, you would pick this guy before you'd pick Birthing Pod?
Yes. The Birthing Pod is just more Architects, and it accelerates your mana when you search up a blue creature with Birthing Pod and you get 2 more mana. Oh, wow. So that's how you step up the curve very fast.
Did you ever look at any point about, like, Deceiver Exarch?
Yes, it was in the deck from the beginning, just to step up the curve even faster.
Right, so you get to do 2 searches with your Birthing Pod on one turn?
And get mana with Architect.
Right.
So, but it wasn't good enough when you drew it. So.
Okay. All right, well, good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
Signing off for Kenny Öberg, this is Brian David Marshall from the Tournament Center.